Here's a question, back to horror. What is a movie that you would consider just not worth your time? Because I did just say that, you know, most of the horror out there is trash, but I'm not really sure how to say what is and what isn't.
Right.
I mean, there's the kind of general principle that if evil is being presented as good, that's not good.
Right.
But that, you know, I think of things like Freddy Krueger. Did you ever watch those as a kid? Or?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think I
those,
don't have too much patience for anything in that slasher category.
Yes. Now,
you know, like teenagers
I'm
going
with you.
to a cabin in the woods. Although I thought Cabin in the Woods was kind of funny. Like there was something about that was.
Well, even the first Evil
poignant.
Dead. I don't know if you ever watched that.
Which?
The first Evil Dead.
Sure.
You've got these.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So yeah.
So what is it about the slasher film that's out of bounds for you?
Well, I think that they horror and the horror genre and pornography, or species of pornography, if you will, they've become too closely linked.
I'm with you.
Like, first of all, like, you know, there's always that mandatory scene in these types of trashy horror movies where you know that's pornography.
It's almost like the contrast of the feelings of both fear and arousal that creates something.
Yeah, absolutely. It's unhealthy. And the pornography of violence. You know, in the same way that pornography is showing you something that you ought not to see. This is something that's supposed to be covered up. There's a species of pornography, or maybe I'm using that word a little too loosely, applied to violence.
They press it in your face.
You shouldn't need to see this. Like, this is meant to be hidden, these entrails.
Yeah.
Or this sort of destruction or disregard, this violence to a human person is not something that it's against our nature to see those sorts of things, I think. And so all of that is...
And yet you watch The Passion of the Christ.
Yes, but I have some reservations about that movie.
Yeah.
It is.
But you see the objection. If it's against our nature to see the destruction of human beings, which I get that argument, but we also hang up crucifixes.
Yes,
and tell people to look at them.
And the crucifix that you typically see is a far cry from what Gibson put on. I mean, I definitely think that film is a work of art, and that Gibson approached that with a lot of artistic integrity and honesty, and wanted to create scenes that were like their own sort of a film version of a Caravaggio. You know, he really tried to make a dance out of the Passion in a certain sense, and like his Pieta is beautiful in that movie with the hand of Mary open on her son's breast. It's very moving. But Mel Gibson is certainly somebody who is moved by the effect of violence in storytelling. His films are violent. Have you seen Apocalypto?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, there's something about violence that fascinates him.
But see, it is interesting though that if we're going to draw the line with slasher films, because they're putting in your face what ought to be concealed, but people don't generally make that same argument for, say, action films. What was that excellent movie Mel Gibson did that you liked? Braveheart's great. That's an example, but no, a recent one, Hacksaw Ridge, was a fabulous film, I thought.
Sure.
And yet you see a great deal of carnage in that.
That's true.
So,
I guess, you know,
because I'm agreeing with you understand?
Like, I do,
agree but I'm trying to figure out what it is.
Well, you know, whether it's a story of heroism and war, or the story of the Passion of the Christ, there's something about those stories that violence has to have a place there. There's a role for violence, like the story of the cross. Violence is the whole point in a certain sense, right? It's this vehicle whereby this unthinkable mystical sacrifice and atonement was made. It's appropriate. We're to meditate on the passion, the wounds, the scourging, the nailing, the crowning, that there's something appropriate to consider the violence, but meditating on those mysteries of the rosary is obviously different than like getting a close up.
Yeah.
Now, so you know, there's a couple different ideas on the table right now with this, but Mel Gibson is someone who is moved by violence. I think it affects him in a way that I'm assuming, is positive for him in a certain way. That because there is this violence in this war scene, whether Braveheart or Hacksaw Ridge or The Passion of the Christ, is like, this means something. This is meaningful. This pain, because pain is something that's meaningful. Mm-hmm. It's something that we all have to work through as, part of our fallen nature. But there's something about Gibson that makes me suspicious that he has a kind of, perhaps, I don't want to make any judgments, but it's just from, I can judge his art, that maybe a fascination with evil. And that maybe The Passion of the Christ is a movie that for him, it's like the most meaningful thing for him personally. And he shows it. And the idea of artistic responsibility seems to come into play there, where you have to be responsible in your art. Your art shouldn't cause a scandal. You know what I'm saying? Or at least there should be a lot of caution about that. Like, for instance, one of my favorite instances of this idea is the first, what's considered the first artistic depiction of the crucifixion. Do you know about this?
No.
It's a piece of graffiti art in Rome, ancient. I can't remember what year it comes from. It's like, but it's a scrawl on a wall of a figure crucified with a man sort of dressed like a Roman centurion. It's very crude, with his hand in the air as though in salute, and then written, it says, Alexamenos worships his God. It's a mockery. And, well, I didn't get to the most important part. The figure crucified has the head of a donkey. And it's quite a thing to see. Even in a scrawl, this depiction of Christ with the head of a donkey, because it's meant to show, like, this is a fool. This is a fool. A crucifixion was a fool's death. And, it captures something that we have lost, I think, about the cross, because thankfully we don't execute people like that anymore. But the ignominy of the cross, the embarrassment, the shame, where the pain is one thing, but the shame of it is another. That sometimes I feel maybe, we meditate, we can imagine that being naked and nailed up for all to see would, be terribly embarrassing. But I have a friend who is an artist. His name is Andrew Wilson Smith. He's a sculptor and does a lot of sculpture work and architectural work for churches. Now he's an active sacred artist. He's talked to me in the past about a desire to make a sculpture of this. Of the donkey-headed Christ.
Wow.
Because to sort of say, look at this. Remember the ignominy of the cross.
Sure.
This was part of it. But, he has said to me that I won't make that sculpture.
You got to be careful.
Because it will be seen as, it would make a scandal.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be wielding my artistic responsibility well in that.
Yeah.
And it would be seen as, something that was disparaging the cross.
So it's this artistic restraint.
Right. And so,
and the question is, like, is there any room for restraint, or is all restraint merely naivety? That seems to be the kind of idea, that if you're restraining, or if you think there's cause for restraint, it's just because there's something bad about you. Yeah. A coward, or I don't know, not adventurous.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, nothing worth doing is free of peril, certainly. But did Mel Gibson wield the power of his artistry responsibly when he shows us a scene of Christ suffering that makes us sick to our stomach? I don't know. Is that...
Yeah, no, it's a good point.
I don't know that's necessarily... It's one thing to show the scourging and you bring the blood, but when that whip gets caught in the side...
Dear Lord.
It's like...
Yeah, that's right, I get you.
Is that necessary? I know that you want to say... You think he went to the bottom, and it was extreme.
Yeah,
but some things need to be covered.
Part of the problem with that movie is that it's difficult now to read The Passion without seeing that in your own mind. That's
right.
Probably the problem of any depiction on film. You read The Lord of the Rings. How do you read The Lord of the Rings without seeing the Frodo as portrayed in that movie?
Right. Yeah, and it's also interesting, thinking about, we're talking about movies and what's appropriate and inappropriate perhaps to show in a story, in a movie. Movies are a powerful medium. It's interesting to see what's become of the story in our day and age, but certainly we've made plenty of allowance for the gritty and the frightening in things like fairy stories, mythology. What is it about horror stories that gives us perhaps a little bit more pause about showing the gritty, the violent? You know, we were talking about The Robber Bridegroom chopping up this woman. I would read that story to see that in a movie. Exactly. Yeah. I would read that story to my 7-year-old. Yeah. And you know, and he'd be like, "Whoa," and that's okay. I would say that's a good experience. So you've had a little bit of a chill there, and things, and you're here with me, but you know, these sorts of things are out there, and good conquers evil. But I would never show him, that in a movie. And what's the difference there?
I think part of the difference is the point of the violence. The point of the violence in Hacksaw Ridge is to show the heroism of this character and the love he showed for his brothers, who at first wrote him off and had no respect for him.
Right.
Like there's something there that's a better thing to show than much of the horror seems to be. We want to make you feel sick.
Yes. Right.
And horror and just disgusted. And so here it is.
Right.
You know, that's a different kind of thing. I don't know how to mete that out necessarily, but that's...
Yeah. So, and obviously that is the whole purpose of the slasher fare.
Exactly.
That's all it wants to do.
For me, and the little horror stories my sister and I write, we have a little podcast called Sibling Horror. I prefer those movies and stories that are strange and just sort of make you... Well, the closest I can get to it is the idea of, you know, some of the better X-Files episodes where there's just this strangeness.
Right.
Supernatural suspense. Fiction.
There's more... those are stories that are inviting us to bring our own imaginations
Though I gotta say, one of the movies that I love, my favorite horror movie, would probably be The Shining.
Sure.
That's an excellent movie.
It is.
There's probably many criticisms.
Why do you hate to say it?
Well, because I guess I don't want to lead anybody into error, sin. So I'm cautious.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of things that I think that I wouldn't necessarily say because I'm not sure if I should think them.
Sure.
There's the image of the naked woman in that scene, which I is problematic. But I mean, it's just a very creepy, strange film.
Yeah, no, it's a powerful film. I'm not sure what the point of it is, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point.
Like it's
just a story about a man's slow
descent into madness under kind of curious circumstances.
Yeah,
but
that's a good point. I should probably ask myself. Okay, good that you like it. Why?
Yeah.
If you like that clip, be sure to like and subscribe. Cheers.